by the way, this 1.6 trillion that is owed outweighs all the other things that you mentioned: car loans, mortgages.
Does it really?
Consumer credit cards. Yeah, that was what shocked me today.
Consumer credit's got to be the biggest of all.
No, this federal loans taken out for college is more than they owe car loans, credit cards, consumer debt. That's me every time.
I thought you were going to start the episode. Like, hey, welcome to the episode.
That's literally how I feel all the time. We haven't been doing that. I kind of like the just starting takes. You know.
All right, well, we're doing that. Joseph did pretty good on stage today, by the way. I don't know if you heard him speak about this student loan forgiveness.
Joseph B?
Yeah.
But he got through a speech?
He free-flowed a little bit of it, and it was pretty cogent and coherent. Yeah, and then he switched to the teleprompter. He stole a little bit, but like he told a story about like...
Oh, he just can't read.
About maybe that's it. Maybe that's his whole problem. But he went on a story about his dad and how important education was growing up. And then he went on to announce some pretty big student loan forgiveness items. I think we'll just hit the highlights. There's a bunch of stuff, but main one being that they're forgiving $10,000 of student loan debt for people making under $125,000 a year. They're extending the COVID era pause on student loan payments until January. And I think there is, if for people who have a Pell Grant, there's what, is it 10,000?
I think it's an additional 10,000
10,000
they're forgiving for Pell Grants.
Right. And then I think he's also saying if you have student loan debt and you go into civil service, there's some other type of forgiveness method they can take up on. So if you go work for the government or the reserve or anything like that, maybe even firefighters, policemen, something like that. So that was the summary, and that was their solution to a problem.
Well, yeah. Doesn't it feel, Armand? Doesn't it feel like that is just a very temporary solution? Like we were saying offline that this could feel like taking an Advil when you have a brain tumor. Yeah. Like it's just going to very temporarily alleviate the pain, but it doesn't fix the actual problem. The actual problem being that like college expenditures are just exorbitant. Like, why are we in this
situation
to begin with, where we're forgiving loan debt, and then like we can even talk about the economics of forgiving loan debt at the end, but like let's talk about like,
why are we issue. Yeah, I mean, it is a terrible solution. We never we never get to the heart of the matter in anything, like politically. It's always a band-aid solution, and like you said, that's like 4-hour relief for a 40-year-old problem. So what is the idea of even forgiving debt? Why do we do it? What's the real incentive? What's the motive or the ulterior motive? And what is the consequence of doing so is my question. I have a belief, but I'm curious what you guys think.
I want to get reelected.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get down, let's go into the political rat hole real quick. I mean, this is coming, a few months before a midterm elections. And this is the easiest way to hand out money to, and we will probably touch on this, which is mostly a Democratic constituency.
Yes.
And you can kind of read through this just by the fact that it doesn't solve the underlying problem while we're here. It's essentially handing people money. You could even go as far as say it's buying votes. And so I think that's the underlying motivation behind forgiveness. And I think between the four of us, we'd probably be okay with some forgiveness if we solved the underlying problem. And I think this problem originally starts with the fact that the federal government guarantees student loans. So in 1965, there was some kind of legislation where the federal government said we will guarantee federal loans. And so naturally what you have happen from there is essentially a financial bubble around an asset class. And that asset class is education. And so you have all this free money flowing about, lenders willing to lend it out because it's going to be backed by the United States government.
And that's probably a reason why tuitions have gone up in price so much, is because it's freaking government free money that they're giving to students.
Yeah, in the last 50, 60 years, private college has gone from $2,500 a year to $45,000 a year, and public has gone from $1,200 a year to $21,000 a year. So I didn't do the inflation adjusted metric, but still that's an exorbitant rise, and you can imagine what happens. So there's a bunch of risk-free money that lenders are willing to lend out, and so of course private institutions pop up, private universities pop up and say, we'll happily create an educational product, whether it's good or bad, whether it's actually going to increase your earning power or not.
Right. We'll take the government's money.
We'll happily take this money. And so, I think that's really where I start with this thing is like, why didn't we address or even acknowledge that this is why we're here? That, when you give out a loan, it has to have an ROI. And this clearly doesn't have an ROI based upon the fact that these people have taken all these loans and it hasn't actually increased their earning power.
Right. It's not a free market. But Stephen, you have the stats in front of you, I think. Like if this is truly buying votes, like how many votes did they buy? How many students are there that they're going to forgive? And like, is this actually going to move the needle if they are trying to, get reelected? And this is a play on that.
Yeah. I mean, I know 43 million Americans have debt. 2/3 of them owe $10,000 or more. So it's a lot. And I don't have the exact number of how many people are going to get this, but it comes out to about the Wharton School of Business did a study on this. They said it was going to be about 300 billion in total forgiveness. And if they want to do the 50,000 kind of Bernie Sanders plan, that's like closer to like 900 billion.
Out of total, I think it's like 1.5, 1.6 trillion in total student loan debt.
Yeah, so it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot of money. I mean, there's a million different angles we could take on this, I guess. Like, I guess like step one is, how do you guys feel about what literally happened? Like, how do you feel about forgiving $10,000 of debt for people who make under $125K?
It's a great question. I want to ask, because we went to the same school.
Right.
The three of us went to the same school, and I didn't pay my own way. My parents paid for me, but you guys took out student loans or paid your own way. And I'm guessing you've paid that down or paid that off.
Yeah, my mom and myself took separate loans to pay through college, and we both paid that down.
Right. So you might have an emotional reaction to this as well, because you're like, well, do I get paid back for the loans that I paid?
When I was a kid making less than 120, I want mine.
And that's a good point. We paid it back at a time when we weren't making any money.
Yeah.
It was like a real hardship.
Yeah, it was hard. And I remember the time I had some money and I was like, Mom, I can pay these off now. Like, thank God. And I can pay yours off. And that was
I
cool.
wish I'd taken more loans. Honestly.
Yeah, I mean,
in some ways, different thing. Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think this is, since we're on kind of the political topic, this could potentially backfire because you have a cohort that did pay off their loans. You have a very large cohort of the economy who didn't even take loans. We're talking working class, which is over half. You're not talking professional, college educated, type of jobs. We're talking blue collar jobs, or just people who didn't go to college but still have done well.
That's interesting.
And that's the majority of people. And so now you're saying today, because we guarantee these loans, because we inflated this asset class, well, the bill is coming due, and now the majority of people are going to have to pay for this through taxpayer dollars.
I have an opposite take, actually.
Okay.
I think this is going to be very good for the Democrats. This is like the problem of like the vegan coming to dinner where like 15 people aren't vegans, but like the cost of you eating vegan food for one night is not that big of a deal, and the vegan, it fits everything for the vegan, right? So if you tell a cohort of people, we'll forgive all of your debt, you're basically just going to get $50,000. Boom. And then you tell all the other people, most of whom are probably in a lower tax bracket anyway, and maybe they don't even pay any taxes, right? And you tell them, okay, you get $50,000 and you have to pay
$7,
an extra $500 over the next 10 years in taxes. The guy who gets $50,000 is going to be way more motivated to vote for that party than the guy who has to like bear this sort of indeterminate cost spread over a long period of time. And you can tell him the billionaires are paying it or whatever. Like, that guy's not going to be as motivated, right? But I also think this is kind of scary because this ties into our financial like thesis, right? I do think that this is the canary in the coal mine of like how the game theory of populism sort of is going to play out over the next 5 to 10 years, right? I think one of the bad arguments that Republicans use is that, like, what about all these guys who paid off their debt and did the quote unquote right thing, and how do they feel? I think there's an easy counter to that argument, right? Like the fact that you did something, but somebody else is in pain, it doesn't necessarily mean that the other person needs to suffer. So I don't think that argument is particularly strong. I think that the better argument is that, like, okay, once you say we should allocate $300 billion here to do this because it benefits these people. Well, you now have just like opened the door. It's like, okay, let's think about all the other areas where the government can throw $300 billion at something. Like, are we really thinking that this is the best use of $300 billion that the country can use is to pay down like college debt for people who are
Right,
probably like doing okay anyway?
Isn't there like a skew on the type of demographic that this benefits?
Yeah, there is a skew, but like, I don't think it's like as much as some of the Republicans are like hyping it up to be like, oh, this is all like latte sipping, left, West Coast, East Coast, coastal libs, just like free rolling college
Did a
on
gender
the backs
studies
of
degree.
like the plumbers and like.
But it is a part of it. I mean,
It's true to like a small extent, I think, but I think that's like a diversion. Like the real problem is like once you do this, well, there's like 50 other ways you could spend $300 billion where you're like, well, I mean, these are way more effective than knocking 10K
but
off
they
these
don't
people.
get the votes that they want.
No, they will get the votes that they want. That's the thing. Like we're gonna once we do this, we're gonna be like, look at all these other ways we can throw 300 billion, 400 billion, 500 billion around. And once we've justified doing this, then well, you just logically why wouldn't we do that?
Oh, I thought Pandora's box was open during during COVID stimmy checks where they'll just start paying you to vote for me. Like
I agree.
And I mean, in Europe, they did like, hey, gas is too high. We're going to give you a little gas stimmy rebate check. So like those things can continue to open up those possibilities.
And we also just gave people just oodles of money via PPP, right? The Paycheck Protection Program during COVID. Immense amount of that was fraud. Did not go to the guy. We bailed out Wall Street in 2008.
Yeah, but hold on. That PPP helped those guys with liberal arts degrees that have a bunch of student loans keep their job.
Keep their jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the counter
Potentially.
argument. My argument to that would be that what would it like 50 cents on the dollar kind of went to it, and the other 50 cents you could kind of fudge pretty easily. Let's be honest. And then there was also just massive amounts of fraud on top of it, right? So I would probably guess that like 20 or 30 cents on the dollar of that program actually went to those people, and the rest of it we lit on fire. And like I said, we bailed out Wall Street in 2008. Like there's just so much precedent for us dumping money into everybody except the little guy that it's very hard to see how like the little guy doesn't just make his voice heard now. We don't just see more and more and more and more of this, because once you do those things, it's very hard to be like, no, we can't help you.
I completely agree, and I know Armand wants to talk about the education side of this, but let's keep going on the financial side because I just want to piggyback off Steven. And I was thinking like, if you were going to try to like, because I think the burden eventually falls on the taxpayers at large, right? When you like bail out this debt holder, like that, ultimately the taxpayers bear the burden of their debts, right?
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I want to talk about that.
Okay, so
Because I don't believe in this idea the way that it's positioned as forgiveness. Like, what is forgiveness?
oh yeah, it's a subsidy.
doesn't disappear.
It's a subsidy. Yeah,
It's a loan transfer.
Yeah,
It's
and
a debt transfer.
It's to the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And what I'm thinking is like, if we're going to subsidize this, like, why don't we make a smarter subsidy? Like a subsidy for education that can result in productivity. Like, because we're subsidizing degrees from all aspects, but there's certainly degrees that we want to promote here in the United States that can benefit society. And it's like, why don't we subsidize those directly? Not from the taxpayer, but from the government. Like, make those degrees cheaper or free or whatever. Like, push people into these careers that actually can create a positive outcome.
Right. So it's interesting. Student loans is very unique in that the risk is flat across whoever's taking the loan. No matter what degree you're taking, how much you want, like the risk in giving the loan is considered the same across the board. But you look at other areas where loans are given out, particularly in the private market. You look at credit cards.
Yeah.
You don't get $100,000 limit, right? When you get a credit card, you might get $1,000, and then you build up credit. You want to take a car loan out. Like, they're not going to give you enough for a Bugatti right off the bat, right? You're going to start off with something smaller. Same thing with a home. It's like, well, how much down payment do you have? And that will determine that there is
Collateral,
like dynamic risk.
And by the way, this 1.6 trillion that is owed outweighs all the other things that you mentioned: car loans, mortgages.
Does it really?
Consumer credit cards. Yeah, that was what shocked me
Consumer
today.
credit's got to be the biggest of all.
No, this federal loans taken out for college is more than they owe car loans, credit cards, consumer debt.
That was
Other than
that was standing. I still think there would be a big enough private market to fund those, to take on those debt. Now, not everyone would be able to go to college in that scenario. And then,
well, you certainly wouldn't be able to study some obscure thing that you might be passionate about.
right. So not everyone goes to college, but then you know what happens to the price of college if there's not enough demand? Exactly. It goes down. So like this all ties in together, that when you fix price or supply of money in a market, you artificially inflate that. And so I do think this flat risk pricing across everyone in student loans is a big part of it. And you'd like to see potentially the
how do you
private
do that for an 18-year-old? How do you assess risk?
I think that the market would figure it out, in the sense that it's hard to centrally plan this, and that you'd have 12,000 companies probably try to figure it out, and maybe 2,000 of those would be like, interesting.
As a private lender, you would be more inclined to lend to like a STEM type of degree
Exactly.
than you would to some liberal arts.
And then they
thing.
would
You
come
just
up
know
with
their
credit
career,
ratings.
what they're doing,
because you'd be
not
more
only
likely to be paid off.
and maybe the government is subsidizing or incentivizing that as well a little bit, right?
Right. And so right
would be
now,
nice.
these I forget which magazine puts out, I think it's US Reports or something like that, puts out the world rankings or US rankings.
US News.
Instead of using that, you'd have essentially a credit score for colleges. Like, what is their ability to input students and output students that actually
dollars.
can earn money in our economy?
That's such simple. These are all just so simple ideas that are not being focused on or invested.
And I get
into.
why it makes sense to federally fund these things, because it sounds good. It feels good. It makes sense to just give money to people who go to college so they can go to school and earn more. But what it turns out to be is that when you don't apply risk to the equation, you make bad investments, and now this debt is coming due. And so I do think there's a way to solve it. And in the short term, it would be pretty fucking painful, and it would be pronounced as cruel, that not everyone would be able to go to college. But I think in a very quick amount of time, you'd see some of these private universities
So you're talking
not
about
see the enrollment they want.
I don't think that's a problem. I don't think everyone needs to go to college.
But you're talking on a going forward
Yes.
basis, not retroactive, not looking backwards.
Right.
Because there's people who have the debt already, and they've made their choices, and they made those choices when they're 18, and they're probably were ill-equipped to make the right decision, and that's a different conversation. But you're talking about a moving forward scenario.
Yeah,
where it's
because Armand asked, how do you risk profile an 18-year-old in their future earning capacity? And it could be by degree. And then I think there would be someone who would smash a bunch of data together and be like, well, this college, it's pretty low rated on the U.S. reports. It's number 627, but shit, they have a pretty good track record
that
of outputting.
college and that degree.
Right, and that specific degree. And then the market would play out. And you'd have a shrinking spread between how many job openings there are and how many unemployed there are. So there's a lot of job openings, but we don't have the necessary skills and the people in our population to match those. So ideally, you would see that close if this thing works out to plan.
Do you not see the problem though? If you just have a whole free market system for education, where you can only get an education on the basis of, are you rich enough to afford this, or are you going to go into a STEM career that the market
I absolutely
values,
do.
right?
I think
Because to
the
me,
best-
that's a huge.
the best.
No
jobs.
one goes into music,
No one
liberal
goes into
fine arts.
No one goes into there is a place in society for music and arts and the liberal arts and social science. There is some
Of course.
place for that, right? And we should also be aware of the fact that STEM might be really valuable today. What if everybody goes in the STEM because that's what the market wants, and then 10 years from now, AI renders your ability to do math and logic useless?
No more
And
Beethoven.
What we all want is creativity now.
Well, then we
We've,
end
got
up
rid of all the
we end
creative
up where
people.
we are now, which is where the fucking jobs don't match with the skill set.
No, I think it ends up becoming like Interstellar, where everyone becomes a farmer.
I actually think that all that does is you don't need to go to a traditional education, graduate or postgraduate program in order to get the education you need for many of those creative outlets. You could go to trade school for certain things, very specific types of education, but this public school, private school, university level education, I actually think is this whole flawed ideology we have as a society. Most people don't need it. And I think people are figuring that out very quickly.
And just to counter what you said about like, there will be no fine arts, there will be no liberal arts, there will be no music majors. And there may be less of them, but what needs to happen is the market needs to appropriately price those majors.
Yeah.
And those studies.
I just don't think they need to be a college major. That's not a college major.
So let's talk about
go STEM if you want to go to college. Like, look, my perspective on this is like, okay, let's take a half step back. First of all, I think it's very interesting, this idea that we touched on earlier, just to close out the debt thing. That debt is not going anywhere. It's just going in the hands of somebody else. Like, there's no such thing as this idea of like forgiveness. That's one thing I really heard here.
Okay,
it's like,
I want to build on that too when you're done.
Build on that.
I have a.
Let's build on that, but I do want to talk
thought.
about education as well.
Yeah.
It's a very simple idea. It's just like there is no debt forgiveness. There is only I'm going to transfer this debt from one person or one group of people to another.
Correct. So my question on the debt forgiveness is, why are we transferring the burden from the people with the debt to the taxpayers?
And the people that with the debt are the ones that were 18 years old that made the decision to take the debt. It is their responsibility. They fell for the sham. I was one of those people. I get it. So that's why it's like Eric was like, well, how do you feel as a person that took
I
the
am
debt?
actually sympathetic to the idea that we should get like I don't think it's objectively good for society that there are millions of people saddled with incredible amounts of debt at high interest rates that they can't discharge in bankruptcy.
I was going to say,
in a
are you going
world
to talk
where
about
there's
bankruptcy?
zero interest rates everywhere. It's just like obviously obscene to me, right? But it's also obscene to transfer that whole burden to the taxpayers. I mean,
Right.
I've talked about this before.
Both of
where,
these
like,
things are true.
we've talked about we've briefly talked about like wealth taxes on the show before and how I'm like actually sort of theoretically in favor of them in a way, even though I can't figure out a way to implement them because government functioned in a way in which we just like enriched a bunch of people who were the beneficiaries of just like random government policy that didn't do anything, right? So I don't see a problem with clawing back some of that wealth. The analog to this is with the colleges and universities in this system. They're the people who are just benefiting from like ultimately when you discharge the student's debt and put it on like the burden of the taxpayer, you know who still has all the money that they got? The freaking colleges. Like Harvard's got $42 billion in endowment. These have billions of dollars in endowment. Why don't we take back some of these endowments, right?
Yeah, they have
these
so much
colleges,
profit.
Yeah, they're allowed to like run.
Why don't we stop scamming kids?
Okay, so
Scamming kids with what? How are we
College.
scamming kids?
We're scamming kids.
okay, so hold on.
Okay, let's do that next. Like
Let's do that next.
Regardless of whether or not we scam future kids, current adults are still saddled with obscene debt, and current universities padded all of their coffers with all this like free debt money, right?
So-
and then they have massive endowments and they run these like obscene bureaucracies with just administrators just sucking up all this capital, people making tons of money, like being like the diversity, equity, and inclusion chair. They're not educating people. It's just so ridiculous, right? Why don't they
That's a
pay
good
the burden
job, by
of
the
the
way.
forgiveness?
I agree. So I agree that the benefit accretes to the universities, and we can like narrow that benefit. I want to just make one note of the fact that we keep on saying that the burden is borne by taxpayers, and it's not exactly true. I think it is a bit of tax on the wealthy because it's monetizing the debt. Like we are inflating the U.S. dollar by doing this, and then that decreases the value of your dollars. So like it's not just the taxpayer; it's actually like dollar holders as well that are carrying this burden.
Even worse, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But we've only focused on the taxpayer, but
Correct.
it's both.
So, in bankruptcy law, you can't, you can get rid of all your debt if you file bankruptcy, except for your student loans. So in your case, Stephen, I guess I don't think it doesn't necessarily hold the university accountable if people can get rid of their debt during bankruptcy, because the only person it affects is the lender.
Yeah.
Right. So that doesn't necessarily solve that.
If you're a university, you have every incentive to just provide the shittiest product possible. You have no accountability for whether or not anybody actually got a good education, and like it just the market's totally warped. It's like it's so ridiculous. Like I looked at some of these stats on this. It's like insane. Like in 1980, administration was 24% of college expenditures. Today, that's 50% of expenditures is just admin. There used to be 6 faculty for every administrator. Now it's just 2 to 1.
Damn.
Right?
Whoa.
That's like insane. Another thing I saw,
It's bloat. That's a lot of bloat.
full-time professors reduced by 15% It looks like there like that colleges like added faculty, but in reality they reduced full-time professors and they moved in like part-time kind of adjunct people with like less credentials. And over the same period, in aggregate, they increased administration officials by 25%. So negative 15% on the full-time professors, basically on a relative basis.
Well, you need a lot of
plus
accountants.
25% on
You
admin.
need a lot of accountants to count up your money.
It's such a gross misallocation of resources, and
Such
like
a
this is
literally
what you,
perfect statement.
It's like-
Oh.
it's just like healthcare, right? Like it seems like whenever you inject government into something, like I feel like I've played the game theory out on this, and I struggle to find like an equilibrium. It kind of feels like you have to take this like Ayn Randian, like complete full like free market, like every man for himself thing, or you inevitably just have to get to a point where government runs everything. Because in this middle ground, you get this like extreme like regulatory capture and rent extraction, and it's just like you get a shitty product for everybody.
So let me try to segue over to Armand's point by continuing on the financial side. Like, do you think that if we go more free market, do you think that the education side solves itself? Meaning, like the cost of education goes down, and then and like sort of people filter naturally into better fits just because it's not all guaranteed. Like, do you think that's the answer to fix education broadly?
Part of the ROI problem solves it so that one part of the equation, which is the cost, would go down.
Yeah.
Right. But I also have, nephews-in-law, like, people who are just about to graduate high school. And I'm asking them, like, what are you going to do next? Like, are you going to go to college? And I heard like, well, I could go to this trade school and then become an electrician within 2 years and actually make some real money without going to school.
God, I'd be proud of that nephew.
Yeah,
Same.
because like, just like Stephen showed us the dentist path, on which is actually a pretty predictable path to wealth. You could also take that path, save your money, invest it wisely, and
It's dentist in quotes. It's like you can insert any sort of like trade to basically like be analogy.
right.
for
So let's
dentist.
talk about this subject of like, is college in general? Let maybe wipe out the cost scenario, but like, is college in general
Yeah.
a good ROI for an
Well,
individual?
Eric, you asked again. It's still a financial question what you're asking, but it's a really good segue. I mean, we're big on anecdotes here. So anecdotally, when you look at the world and you look at other countries, the best education systems in the world that I'm aware of, the family I have cousins abroad, Sweden, Germany, whatever, these are all university systems that are heavily government subsidized. So they're not free markets. And we had another person in the Discord today, I think it was Dante. No, we had someone, Dante mentioned something about
I got
Argentina.
I got the take.
Give the take, Stephen.
Yeah, Dante today said he'd live in a free education country, and I feel university is outdated unless you go to the technology career. So on one hand, everyone can learn and work of what they learn, but when you finish your career, you have another 2 to 5 years of catching up with new procedures. Student death sounds like an enslaving system to have a cheap educated workforce where they finish their career and now they need to pay the bills, so they'll take the worst end of their career jobs at any price to pay the debt.
Indeed.
Do you agree with that take?
Well, we had another person. I think it's very insightful. We had another person in Quebec. I don't know if you captured that one.
Eric.
Yeah?
Eric
Can you give
Puncher.
that one, actually? I really enjoyed
Yeah,
that
so
one.
Eric said in Quebec we have CEGEP, I don't know.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce it.
Which is like
CGP.
grade 12 high
That's
school.
Italian.
That's not French. For
Yeah, this is a very long take. Yeah.
I can't even do it.
Yeah, you
was-
have,
no,
you
that
have
was right.
mandatory
That was right,
humanities,
okay.
many flavors.
Let Stephen finish the goddamn
All
thing.
right, give the take, Stephen.
So in Quebec, you have this grade 12 first year uni mixed together. And for all programs, you have mandatory humanities with many flavors. Many are philosophical. I think it's brilliant. Great thing about it is that it costs $200 a semester. It encourages people to try different programs while also getting a taste of the college social experience, as the drinking age here is 18. I think more places should have this before letting people go spend big money on education. It's like university training wheels. You only get to do it after leaving high school. It really is too bad that education is so damn pricey in the U.S. I think it's so important for people to be able to study what draws them. Getting a bachelor's degree in anything does a lot for helping you stand out in the workforce later.
I think that's cool. Like, your first year, first semester, broaden your horizons.
Gap year, something we don't have in America as well.
So I kind of believe in something like gap year, but like interlaced amongst your 4-year college degree. So like I look back on like, why was I able to get a job that paid enough to pay the student loan off? And in my sophomore year, I started doing internships, like paid jobs alongside where, working like a valet to pay the bills and then like a professional job to get experience. Yeah. And I did that from sophomore, junior, senior. And so, I think the ideal scenario would be like you do some college and maybe in your second year, the amount of units you have to take decreases, but you have to get a professional job in order to decrease your units. And that's part of your thing. So when you graduate, not only do you graduate with a worthless degree, but then you graduate with worthwhile like commercial experience where
all of
as an employer, I give a shit about.
Wait, hold on. My only question is because we studied finance together. Is that right? You studied finance?
I started marketing and then MBA in entrepreneurship.
You were also in business school. I remember we cross paths in there. But like within our unique specifications, like you do start broad and then it does narrow over time. Like as you like get into your junior year, it does narrow. Like I remember I was only taking finance classes by my junior and senior year. Yeah. So it does go that direction even today.
It does. But what I'm saying is like interject a job relevant to potentially your major or just a job in general that has commercial experience and wipe out some of those unit requirements. And so that like you graduate with some actual experience that can get you a job.
That would be unbelievable. Especially if it was facilitated by the university that you were going to. Incredible. Like if you could combine like getting on the job experience, like real world experience while you study and reduce the number of credits you need to take. Really what you're doing is subsidizing your education. That's incredible.
Yeah.
We don't have anything close to that. You got to go valet cars to pay
you
off.
You got to go grind it out at 80 hours a week.
Loan, and that's only if you can. And most people don't. And so this whole thing to me is just a fucking scam.
Well, can I throw out a little tinfoil on like how we got here?
I would love a tinfoil.
And I don't know if it's that tinfoil. I think it's actually accurate, but like I guess it's tinfoil to the world, maybe accurate to me. But like my idea here is that like my mom kind of told me from a young age, she's like, you got to go to college. Like college is the way. And I think like a lot of people were pushed on this path, right? Like, and I think the idea of that is because the generation previous, or maybe two generations previous, were like workers, like working in the factory or working in the manufacturing. But then like if to get to management level, you would set yourself apart by having a degree. And that those people would become like sort of managers. So then they took that the next step to the next generation and said like, well, we want you to like have the foot forward. And like, so you go to college, and then like everyone got pushed into college to get on like the management track. And now that sort of like alpha of college got completely evaporated, where like now everyone's trained to be a manager, but there's only like so many management positions.
Right.
So now it's like, you got a bunch of people with all this like broad training, nobody with a specific skill set to do like the factory work. And to go further, I think like the way that I perceive education is that most things are actually trades. Like what I do is a trade. Like if I'm like, it's kind of like a funny word to use because I literally trade for a living, but like I think of it as a trade the same way that like learning how to build homes as a carpenter is a trade, is the same way that like learning how to be a musician is a trade. It's like you're learning a skill. But we look at these things completely differently, where it's like a trade school is just to be a plumber, a carpenter, a car mechanic, etc. It's like almost all things are actually trades. And there should be trade schools to teach you a skill. And then there should be like a management school to teach you how to manage people that are, like in the same way that we think of college.
I feel like all this just like pales so much to like on the job experience, like Nick, you've hired a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So like imagine two hypothetical candidates. You're hiring for a marketing position. One kid comes to you. He studied 4 years at USD marketing. Another kid comes to you, went to community college for 2 years, and then worked for 1 year as a marketing intern at Manscaped.
Easy.
Which one are you hiring?
The one with experience.
Of course you are. It's not even close.
And even
not
like
even close.
Even the entry level positions, I'm just looking for like, please show me you even showed a passion, like on your own, separately, tried to start something, tried to do something. You read a book, you followed a class, you followed a course, like show me that you taught yourself something. And then, if you have actual experience in an entry level position, it just like makes it such a low risk decision to bring that person on, because the matter of fact is, when you enter the job market, you have to get trained for that job. Like college doesn't provide you actual work training.
Do you guys remember that kind of like feeling when you were in that position? And there was this like, it was a meme before there were memes. And the idea was like, okay, I am a new graduate. You require 3 years of experience for this role. Where am I supposed to get that experience if this is an entry level position?
Right.
Here's what I got wrong and what I just realized as we're talking right here. That whole system of how to get experience is flawed. College is what prevents you from getting the experience. What is most valuable to the prospective employer, like a Nick or whoever, is that you actually did that task for a year as an intern at Manscaped. So they don't give a fuck today if you have the degree. They care that you did that 1 year internship at Manscaped. So what we actually want as a society, and employers especially that are hiring young people, is that they went and they got that on the job experience. So people today, like, you could go to college, like, sure, you get that like trade specific like training that you think you need. Most likely, I want to save this like STEM idea for later, but like the actual thing that is going to get you going as quickly as possible is if you. So how do you get around that? You don't need a job. You could literally just do it yourself. If you went to Nick and you said, hey man, for the last year, I've actually been growing a couple social media accounts. And here's what I've been doing. And I actually turned on Google Ads, and I even experimented with Facebook as well. And here's what I learned. I learned how to create an opt-in. I learned how to create an email newsletter, and I started a podcast, and I did this and I did that. And I get like 7 views a month. But you know what? Like, I've learned a lot. Nick would look at you and go like, oh my God.
It'd be straight cold face, but corny on the inside.
Yeah. I just throw the gasoline on your skill set and we make money together. Let's go.
Okay, so
like, that's all it takes. And that's, by the way, what we're looking for right now. Quick plug. Like,
we need
all
that.
we're looking for is someone who has a little bit of experience who can come in and help us turn some knobs on a Rodecaster and turn on some cameras and shows a little goddamn interest in that. And like, that's all it needs, because the rest
Amen, brother.
We'll throw the fire on that baby.
No, I actually completely agree with you, but like I think sort of like hiring has changed over the last 20 years. Like it used to be that big corporations hired, and now it's more like guys like Nick's or like Alfalfa Podcast is hiring. When you're talking about corporations, they were using those filters. Like not only did you go to college, that was like
GPA.
That was a check mark. GPA was a check mark. Like you wouldn't have got hired at Ray Dalio's firm if you went to San Diego State, probably. Like you went to Dartmouth and that helped your cause. Like
that's correct.
So like for those old school jobs, like the old filters still apply.
Can I give an example here? All right, so my second job I ever had, as you guys know, was Google. And the way I got into Google, which is very interesting, is right at the time that Google was only hiring Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Ivy League schools, people like Steven. By the way, do you still have student debt?
No, I paid it all off when I was like 25.
There you go.
That was dumb.
Good man.
Oh yeah, you got a
I
refund.
know, I would have kept that forever.
Yeah, you got a refund.
We
coming,
should
I
have
think.
talked about that. We should have talked about that. All right. So, you're talking about Ivy League people that got 4.0s in college, or, maybe not 4.0s, 3.8s and higher, were the only people getting hired at Google. And right like 3 months before I got hired, Google had this epiphany. By the way, I believe they were copying Apple. Apple all of a sudden started hiring people from San Jose State University, which is not a prestigious university.
But a local school.
It's
yeah.
local. They were kind of like,
Well, they probably had like so much demand. They're just
Yes.
like, where else can we go?
Yes. And they were like, wait a second. They did some analysis and they started to realize that their highest performers were not the ones with the highest GPAs. So they started to look at, how do we create performance? Where does work ethic and results-oriented people come from? Is it purely their ability to get good grades, or is there something more to it? And so they started to experiment and see that college maybe is a little bit overrated, and we should open our doors a little more to people and not make it so difficult to get in. And they started experimenting and found great results with people. Then Google wakes up one day and says, we're going to do the same thing. I went to San Diego State, very hard school to get into.
Nowadays especially.
But even then, I think you had to have like it was a top school for its time. It's not Ivy League, but because of the popularity of living in San Diego, people were like, I think it got like 60,000 submissions the year I applied.
I remember specifically it was the most applied to university in the nation.
Yeah, exactly. So getting into me, it was like, hey, I got into like my dream school. So getting into that and being able to go with not a 4.0 to Google was like, oh, okay, this is new. Like, is this guy like gonna do anything? Like,
does he know how to read?
Can this guy read? Didn't go to Harvard. So Google threw that shit out the window. All of their standards. As soon as they opened that door, they realized, okay, the people that perform, it's not just people with good grades or people that went to Ivy League or people that went to the most prestigious university, even public universities like UCLA, UC Berkeley. Those are the top schools in California. They opened that door and things started to change. As things started to change, the entire landscape of success has changed. And my whole take on this is like, if you are going to enter like a STEM field, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, if you're going to go into that area where you're studying computer science, by all means, even computer science actually arguably, by all means, like go get a degree if you feel that that's right for you. Like there is a reason that we need doctors and dentists and scientists to go and get a formal education. If you're going to do surgery on my heart, I want to know you put 8 years into the books, to the research, to the lab, to the clinic. Like you worked in a real setting with real people monitoring you, mentoring you. You put in the work. Like that makes sense to me. But everyone else is waking up to this idea that college is a scam. And I think that that's a really healthy idea. I think that we need to get people to wake up to this idea that this is an inflated system with a very low return on investment. Most people, it takes them a lifetime to be able to pay off their debt. They don't pay it off by 25. They're carrying it forever. We have Paradox, who just said in our Discord today that she had $100,000 sociology degree debt.
160, right?
160.
Was it? Are you serious? I probably didn't even process the second number
because it was the number that came off my.
It was
my
just
head.
a six-figure. I can't even comprehend that. It's wild to me.
It's stupid.
Starting a second career, just like and pivoting. So it's like, okay, you can't sit in that position and like completely regret it and feel bad for yourself. And she by no means is doing that. People move on. They go like, okay, I got that. I paid for it. How can I have a growth mindset about this and like work toward a future where I can actually create something? But the reality is, for most people, this is a complete scam.
Right.
They don't need it.
It becomes predatory by the universities because they're like, oh, well, this is more federally backed, guaranteed revenue for us. So let's just get more students in. And then I think Stephen brought this point up earlier, or he's about to, that like, why are we applying interest rates to student loans when like interest rates were zero
for
12 months ago?
Yeah.
Interest rates were zero and students were still getting charged 6% plus. Like that's absurd.
Well, I mean, society's clearly fucked up. Like if we just zoom out, like it's totally fucked up. It makes no sense that
Steven Cicero.
you saddle. Yeah, it makes no sense that you saddle like the future of the country with like non-dischargeable high interest rate debt. You just give like Wall Street free money. Obviously, that doesn't make sense. And it obviously doesn't make sense that like me and Nick as business owners would like take one candidate who's like Paradox, who spent $160,000 in 4 years at university for a job. And if you gave us like a kid who was like, yeah, I didn't go to college. I actually just watched Khan Academy and YouTube nonstop for a year because I was super interested in this and I think I have some pretty useful skills. We'd probably hire that guy. And he spent like no money.
Yeah,
Like
baby.
it just
The voice is rising.
The voice is rising.
When the voice,
So good.
when
It's
the
truth.
voice,
It's a truth meter.
yeah, it's a truth.
Yeah, it's just like
it's just so
really
it's
means
just
it.
so stupid. Like
You're absolutely right, Stephen. I couldn't agree with you more. We would pick the person who obsessed over Khan Academy for
Also,
a year.
Paradox, we'd probably hire you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. But go ahead, please.
I don't know. I lost my rant.
No, that was important.
It's just so mind-blowingly stupid to me, like just where we are and where we could be, and it's everything is totally messed up.
I have a little more on this college scam idea. Like,
Okay.
there's something that like is also commonly like mentioned here and there that I think is really important. Like, what is really the return on investment of a college education? Is a very interesting question to me. If you're not in a STEM field, okay, say business. We three. What was your major? Psychology. We were all business majors with different finance,
Marketing.
finance, marketing, management, all in the same exact business school, the same school, right? If you really look back, Nick went on to do an MBA as well. Okay. Like, let's just say, and you often joke about the fact that like you were staring at spreadsheets, which by the way, you're very good at these spreadsheets. I mean, you are the algo for
I
that.
had no idea Nick had an MBA, by the way.
Yeah.
The only people who care about an MBA in the job market are people hiring who have an MBA. Outside of that, no one cares about it.
Right.
The only thing I got from it was the people I met. To be honest, I met people I ended up working with, becoming friends with,
and you've
deals
been
with.
you're committed. You've been in San Diego. You moved here. You got your degree. You worked. You helped build a startup. You went back to school. You got the MBA. You became a CEO. You became a CEO. Then you became an entrepreneur who started multiple businesses. Like, it's an incredible path. But was it required is really the question. Like, so many
get the
business
MBA.
owners,
Yeah.
right? So many business owners are just like you, Nick, and I think you and I are similar in that we like the education, we like the environment. And what I argue for is that what most people are actually paying for is a social experience.
Okay, so this is where I want to wrap up
That's
the episode.
it.
Is like,
It's just like
let's
this-
take the argument. What is college good for? Like,
I think it's
what
a
is it-
social
What does it actually do?
It's a social experience. It's the ability to be plugged into a network, to learn how to like start these little projects that are so not real world, by the way, at all. But like the main thing you get from it, for me, is networking. That's
I mean, here's an
know.
example of that we're literally sitting here
know.
at a table because we all went to the same school, plus Steven, which is
But I didn't, and that's why I think this take. I think this take is like nonsense. It's like most people when they go to college,
it's
have,
not
like,
nonsense. 3 of the 4 of us that's sitting here met in college.
Sure, but you would have met elsewhere. I think like
No.
the fact that
How?
you would have met other people.
Fate,
You'd be in a
baby.
different circle, right?
do you have free will?
The idea that you only could have met
Future
because
topic.
you went to this
Oh,
place
write
and
that down.
you did like a bunch of shit you shouldn't have been doing, and you had like sexual encounters that you regret, and you drank too much and killed your life. The idea that
Regret?
you can't.
yeah, hold on.
Speak for yourself,
Still
partner.
doing,
Speak for
still
yourself.
doing it.
like the idea that like we can't do that without college is so stupid to me. Like I did some of my best networking outside of college. Like in college, you're trapped to a degree in this box with people.
Yeah, a bunch
and
of Dartmouth losers.
You make the exactly. You make the best of it with there. But when you go into the real world, you can network with
So
anybody.
I think the biggest advantage of going to college outside of the job, training or non-job training is that typically in college, a lot of people move away from their home, and they're forced to, because it's a trigger. It's a start to move away from home and kind of like live on your own. And it provides this little mini bubble in which you can live on your own, where like there's food close to you. You don't need necessarily a car sometimes, but you do got to balance your own personal budget. You got to learn your drinking tolerance, which, sexual escapades you don't want to go on, and like all those things that you learn in college. But it does provide some like real life skills if you move away from college. If you stay within the same area, close to the family unit, then maybe it doesn't.
Okay, why not just do what you said, but you move to San Francisco and you go work at Google and some like.
Because how are you going to move? How are you going to move without job prospects?
You work at like a company. You work at a company. You have constraints of like a job. You get paid. You can't be a complete like.
They're all remote now, brother.
Yeah.
But
You could.
I get your point. I get your point.
Recreate the college experience, but what college provides, it's like these training wheels of like, you come here, we got some clubs for you. You get set up. You got an orientation day. You can join a fraternity, especially if you go to SDSU. You got people you can talk to if you have questions. You can play sports. You can play intramural sports. You can play, university level sports, D1, D2, D3, whatever
hold
you
on.
want.
Sounds very
you got
infantilizing.
all these things
Hold
set
on.
up for you. But really, what you could do is you could go to the real world and you could recreate that experience. You could for less money if you were intentional and organized and very diligent and conscientious, you could create that experience. But most people can't, so they don't. They go to college because it's laid out for them. It's like you're buying a roadmap. Is what most people are
Armand,
really
you
buying.
pay me $60,000 a year. I will give you the best roadmap,
Okay,
all
hold
the
on.
constraints
I agree.
you want. You know, like
no, I
we
agree.
Can do this for
I
way
agree,
less
and I
than
think that
college.
that's what people are waking up to.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
doing that
I hope
now.
so.
I
They
agree.
are.
But I want to ask future dad in the group, like, are you intending to save money for your child's tuition? Because I put myself in your shoes. Like, I want to be a father one day. And like, of course, I'm going to give that child the opportunity to go to college if they desire it.
Yeah.
Because like all this shit we're saying, like here's a fact. 80% of the wealth in the United States is captured by college graduates. It's not as useless as you think. It's just like there can be alternatives, I think.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's so
I think
early.
that's more
Like
just
nepotism.
I think it's just like a correlation, or like people who go to college tend to come from. I don't think the college is the causation of that. Is what
But
I guess I would say.
That's also a peer group baked in. Like,
All right, but the question is, are you going to save for tuition?
are you going?
Or-
Are you?
Okay, it's a great question. So yes, first of all, thank you, Eric. Yeah, I am expecting in January.
Sorry, you went public on the Discord. So
Yeah,
thought
I
it
went
was
public
okay.
on the Discord. We're going public on the podcast
Wow,
now. I am
congratulations.
expecting finding out the gender this weekend. I'm literally, guys, I'm finding out.
Wait,
the
you
gender.
hadn't told Steven?
No, of course I had.
I'm just pretending.
Okay.
I find out the gender
hamming
in
it up for the
3
audience
days at a gender reveal. Hopefully, nothing explodes and we don't go viral.
I can't believe you're revealing the gender like that.
I know it's a whole thing. Okay, it's so early to even ask that question, but I have thought about it, and the way I think about it was even before any of this news. And it's very simple. I don't think college is going to exist for the most part. Like I truly don't. Like we're talking about 19 years from
Yeah,
now.
not in the way that it does today.
Not in the way that it does today. I think that the institutions that have existed for a long time, Oxford, Harvard, Yale, some school in fucking Singapore, will be around. But they'll be very specific. I think that the models will completely change. So the way I think about, am I saving for my children, however many children I have's future, is I would like to be able to invest in them. Whether that is the decision is to go to a trade school or college or to be the first angel investor in their company. To me, it's all the same. I would ideally like that they follow, like if an entrepreneurial path is like what's right for them. I think it'd be really cool to invest in their first failed business. I like that idea. Like to be able to go to your kid and give a certain amount of money and help them raise. And I actually have a friend whose father has a board seat on his company, and he has an incredible relationship with his father, and he runs this like app, mobile app, sort of like it's a technology company, and he has an incredible life and an incredible relationship, and he does come from means, but he had to earn it and learn the hard way. And I love that. So if you have the ability to do that, I think it's really cool.
So you're willing to invest in education, but not necessarily college, but college as well if that's the path they choose.
College as well, if there's a great reason to do that. But like, yeah, I come from a background where my parents didn't have the money for that. I mean, I think I received like $1,000 a month for a few semesters, and it was a huge help. And outside of that, and I made sure to go to a public school specifically so that I could afford it and not go into extreme debt. And I had to work the whole time. And I love everything about my experience, but to each their own path. Like that was the experience for me.
Awesome.
I think you have some flexibility in the 529 plans, by the way, to be able to like save tax free and then, not necessarily use them for tuition. You can use them for
And go toward like that
books
angel.
and not your angel investment. But
Yeah.
No, there's not as much flexibility as you like, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah. I think that what is that idea or that book? It's like die with nothing or whatever.
Die with zero.
Die with zero.
Something like that.
I like that idea. I don't think I want to leave like a fortune to my
You want
kids.
to tell your kid, you better make your own money because I'm going to spend all of mine.
Come enjoy it with me.
Right.
Is kind of my pitch. Like I'm doing things. Like let's enjoy ourselves.
Dad, please pay for my
you know.
health insurance. I don't want to go to Bali again.
That's not enjoyment.
I would pay for things while I'm around, but like the idea of like leaving,
I like that. I like that.
yeah, I like it. All right. How'd we do?
Went a little over, but we'll wrap
Okay.
it.
We're very time conscious now, guys. I hope you like it. We're keeping these tight and
So what are we talking about next?
passion.
Following your passion.
Following your passion. Should you?
It's a good
follow
segue.
Your passion. Great topic. We'll see you guys there.
All right.
Adios.
Bye.
Adios. Peace.